I didn't think a red paper taped to my front door could ruin a morning, but here we are. It was 6:52 a.m. when I found it. I had just finished making my mom a cup of tea, her hands shake too much these days to hold the kettle, and stepped outside to get the newspaper. That's when I saw it. Bright red. HOA letterhead. Taped right over my peephole. Notice of violation, Section 8.3.2, unregistered residence occupant. It took me a few seconds to understand what I was looking at. Then it hit me. They meant my mom. She'd moved in with me 6 weeks ago. Stage 4 liver cancer. Hospice couldn't come often enough to give her the care she needed. So I cleared out the guest room and told her she'd be staying with me for a while. We both knew what that meant. But according to the Rockridge Lakes HOA, I was now in violation of neighborhood residency limits. The next day, I got the fine notice, $450. And that was just the beginning. The HOA president's name was Brent Daly. Retired dentist. Power-walking narcissist with a Fitbit and something to prove. I'd met him once, at a Christmas mixer, where he told me with a straight face that rules make communities beautiful. That was before he tried to have my garden swing removed because it wasn't approved by the Architectural Review Board. I called the HOA office, of course. Left a message. No one called back. So I emailed. 3 times. Finally, I got a reply, not from Brent, but from a woman named Karen in compliance. Dear Mr. Walker, our records indicate that Ms. Martha Walker is not a listed resident of your property. Under HOA Regulation 8.3.2, any adult residing in a home for more than 14 consecutive days must be formally registered as an occupant or be approved under temporary guest exemption protocols. Your failure to submit this request has resulted in the violation. Kindly note that the fine will recur weekly until compliance is achieved. Sincerely, Karen Bledsoe, Senior Compliance Analyst, Rockridge Lakes HOA. My mother was dying. She weighed 94 pounds. She could barely stand. And this compliance machine wanted me to fill out paperwork to get permission to let her die under my roof. That night, I sat by her bed and didn't tell her about the fine. She looked tired. Frail. Like her body had already started fading from the inside out. She asked for more honey in her tea. I added 2 spoonfuls and smiled like everything was normal. But inside, I was boiling. The next violation came 4 days later. This time, it was about parking. Apparently, my sister had parked her car overnight in front of the residence on 2 consecutive nights, which was against Section 6.4.1, unless you registered in advance with the HOA and got a digital pass. Another $200 fine. They weren't just watching me. They were circling. That's when I started documenting everything. I started keeping a binder. I labeled it Mom/HOA conflict. I printed every email, took photos of every notice, every timestamp violation. I even started recording the weekly HOA meetings on Zoom, though I had to join under a fake name since they disabled my camera after the first one. My neighbor, Tanya, 2 houses down, single mom, nurse, offered to help. She'd had her own run-ins with Brent Daly a year earlier, when he threatened her with fines over non-uniform patio furniture. Her crime? A lime green chair. This HOA is a cult, she told me one evening while we sat on my porch. And Brent? He's their high priest of petty. She wasn't wrong. 2 weeks after the first fine, the violations started escalating. I got a citation for non-conforming window coverings, because I'd hung blackout curtains in the guest room to help my mom sleep. They weren't HOA approved. That was another $100. Then came the noise complaint. Apparently, my mom's coughing was disruptive to the neighborhood. A violation of Section 9.1, Peaceful Enjoyment Clause. I read that one 3 times. She was coughing. From cancer. And that somehow broke a bylaw? I finally tried talking to Brent directly. I waited outside the HOA office one Tuesday morning and caught him on his way in. Brent, I said. It's about the fines. He held up a hand like a crossing guard. Sir, any matters of compliance must go through proper channels. I don't engage in personal discussions regarding violations. I just want to explain, I said. It's my mother. She's... Sir, he repeated, firmer now. The rules apply to everyone. Your circumstances, while unfortunate, do not exempt you. And with that, he walked inside and shut the door. That night, my mom had trouble breathing. I had to call hospice again, and they adjusted her medication. She cried when they changed the patch. I held her hand and stayed awake by her side until dawn. The next morning, there was another red notice. Failure to correct previous violation, cumulative fine total, $750. That's when I snapped. I took photos of every document, uploaded them to a new folder in the cloud, and posted a thread on the local Nextdoor forum titled, HOA fining me while my mother dies. It blew up overnight. The replies came in fast. This is disgusting. I live 2 blocks away, count me in. Brent has been a tyrant for years. He threatened my husband over our trash can once. My kid's lemonade stand got shut down by these clowns. Let's organize. Within 2 days, I had over 40 private messages. Some from neighbors. Some from ex-board members. One woman sent me scanned copies of old board meeting notes. Turns out, Brent had pushed through a motion 3 years ago that gave the HOA president emergency disciplinary authority, with no requirement to consult the board. He had weaponized the bylaws. And now he was using them against me. Once the post went viral, everything changed. Neighbors I'd never spoken to before started waving when I walked by. A retired vet named Harold stopped me in the street and handed me a manila folder. Photos of Brent's backyard shed, he whispered. It violates setback rules. Built too close to the fence. A woman named Lydia dropped off a USB stick in my mailbox. Security cam footage from last summer, she wrote in a sticky note. Brent's son hosted a bachelor party. Noise ordinance be damned. I was building a case. I didn't even have to ask. They came to me. By the end of the week, I had documentation of over a dozen personal violations committed by Brent Daly himself. But more importantly, I had testimonies, single moms fined for chalk drawings, veterans harassed for flag placement, a couple fined for a welcome mat in Spanish. This wasn't about rules anymore. It was about control. I consulted a friend of a friend, a housing attorney named Danielle Ortega. I laid out the fines, the notices, the bylaws, the testimonies, the receipts. She listened without interrupting and then said 6 words that changed everything. You might have a harassment claim. She explained that HOAs are bound not just by their own bylaws, but by state housing regulations and anti-discrimination laws. Targeting someone for caring for a terminally ill relative could cross a serious legal line, especially if it's selectively enforced. Danielle agreed to take the case, pro bono. But she had one condition: we don't just sue. We bury them in daylight. That weekend, we printed flyers titled, Is Your HOA Abusing Power? Join our open meeting, Sunday at 3 p.m., lot behind the tennis courts. 37 people showed up. I brought copies of the fines, printouts of the rules, and a giant poster with Brent's infractions taped side by side with the same rules he fined others for. People gasped. They murmured. They started yelling. An older man in the back stood up and shouted, "Let's vote him out." And just like that, we had a plan. By Monday morning, Brent was rattled. He sent out a community-wide email titled "Stop the Misinformation," accusing unnamed disgruntled residents of spreading falsehoods and malicious rumors. He insisted that all HOA actions were lawful, impartial, and in service of community harmony. He should have just stayed quiet. Because by that afternoon, someone leaked a voice recording. It was Brent, arguing with another board member, a woman named Lacey, who'd apparently resigned a few months ago. Brent recorded, "I don't care if she's dying, if we let one of them bend the rules, they all will." Lacey, she's his mother, Brent. This is disgusting. Brent, I'm not running a damn nursing home. It was 48 seconds long. And it was enough. Danielle sent the clip to a local news station. By Tuesday evening, we were the lead story. They called it, HOA targets resident hosting dying mother. The reporter stood in front of my house with the red violation notice still taped to the door, interviewing neighbors who'd all come out to speak. Tanya, Harold, even the lemonade stand family gave quotes. And there I was, holding my mother's hand on our porch, trying not to cry as the anchor asked if I felt harassed. I didn't have to answer. The tears spoke for themselves. Brent called an emergency board meeting that night, closed door, no recording allowed. But someone inside leaked the agenda, a discussion on damage control, legal exposure, and potential resignation scenarios. We were breaking through. Then something happened that I hadn't expected. An anonymous letter arrived in my mailbox. Typed. No return address. I'm sorry. He's done this to others before. You just finally made it public. Thank you. There was no signature. But it shook me. Because it meant someone inside the HOA, maybe more than one person, wanted him gone too. That week, Danielle filed the harassment claim with the State Housing Board. She also drafted a formal complaint on behalf of 23 neighbors, all of whom had been unfairly fined, harassed, or intimidated by the HOA in the last 2 years. It was no longer my battle alone. It was a reckoning. Brent resigned on a Thursday. No warning. No speech. Just a short email from the HOA board. Effective immediately, Brent Daly has stepped down from his position as HOA president. An interim board will be appointed pending elections. No apology. No admission of guilt. Just, gone. But we didn't care. We celebrated. Tanya brought cookies. Harold popped open a bottle of off-brand champagne in my driveway. Kids chalked justice and free at last on the sidewalks. For the first time in weeks, I laughed without guilt. My mom was too weak to come outside, but when I told her, she squeezed my hand. Her smile said everything. I held that moment. Because I knew we didn't have much time left. The fines were dropped. The harassment claim was still under review, but the HOA, under the new interim leadership, sent me a formal apology. They also pledged to revise the bylaws to include humanitarian exemptions for medical care and end-of-life situations. Danielle called it a good start. I called it victory. 2 weeks later, my mother passed away. It was quiet. Peaceful. I held her hand through the final breath, and when the nurse confirmed, I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're safe now." I buried her in the same dress she wore to my college graduation. The one she called her proudest outfit. At the next HOA meeting, the first open one since Brent's reign, I was asked to speak. I walked up, holding a copy of the red violation notice. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just held it up and said, "This is what grief looks like when you bury it in rules." The room was silent. And then came applause.